Welcome to the Social Engineer Podcast. This is the Security Awareness Series, episode 211. I'm Chris Hadnaghi, CEO and founder of Social Engineer LLC, the Innocent Lives Foundation, and the Institute for Social Engineering. And I've been hosting this podcast since I was a wee one in 2009. And my trusty co-host for this edition of the podcast is none other than Ryan McDougall. Ryan, thanks for being with me here today.
Hey, thanks, Chris. Just as a reminder, I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Social Engineer. I'm also the co-trainer for our master's level social engineering and Red Team Labs offerings. I have taught multiple other classes over multiple years at several public and private events. I've been in the information technology field for almost 26 years, and the last 10 being focused on adversary simulation and security awareness.
So just a couple quick announcements before we start with our awesome guest. This episode is sponsored by our company, Social Engineer. I am sure if you are any size company right now, you are probably figuring out how you're going to combat the threat of vishing. No matter what kind of news program we turn on or where you're looking, you are seeing vishing on the rise. 554% in the last 12 months, we've seen it go up, and it's affecting companies by billions of dollars. What can you do to defend against vishing? Well, I won't tell you that there's a solution out there that can stop it because there is none right now. But our services here at Social Engineer help your people become aware of what it is and then teach them how to report and defend against it. If you're curious about what we can do to help you, just go to social-engineer.com. You can set up to speak with one of us, and we'll meet with you and discuss what it is that we do. In addition, if you go on the top of the website, our State of Vishing report for 2023 was released just a little bit ago, and you'll be able to see a lot of amazing information. 83,000 calls were analyzed and 1.5 million tweets, all about vishing, phone scams, and things like that. And we have a lot of data in there that can help you learn a little bit more about the attack vector and the kind of things you can do to keep your people safe. So head on over to social-engineer.com to check all of that out. And if you're into social engineering, whether you're an enthusiast or you're just a student, you do it for a living, you should join our Slack channel. You can find the link in our show notes down below. And if not, you can either hit up Ryan or I on LinkedIn or any other social media. We'll be more than happy to get you the link. There's over 1,500 people in there now every day talking about social engineering, from the psychology of it to many who do this for a living, and they come in to get help with their pretext or other things like that. So join us on the Slack channel. I'm sure you'll have a good time. It's a family-friendly chat. So if you're into doing things dark and illegal or harassing people, don't come on in, because we really don't want that. We're there to have some good times, talk about social engineering, and learn what we can do to be more defending against that type of attack. And, of course, the education behind it as a communication tool. I also want to invite everyone who's listening to go check out InnocentLivesFoundation.org. I am so proud of the team over there. For 5.5 years now, if you're not familiar with that organization, the mission is to work closely with law enforcement, because we're not a vigilante group, where we help law enforcement geolocate people who traffic children and create child abuse material. And in the last 5.5 years, we are almost at 500 cases now. I think 490 is the number as of today. I'm really proud of the team, because those 490 cases got handed into law enforcement, meaning that we have helped locate either a person or group of people who are harming children and being able to identify them to law enforcement groups so they can be apprehended and no longer hurt kids. If you want to support our mission, you can do so in a couple ways. Maybe you have the talents to help us out. You can join our team over at InnocentLivesFoundation.org. Or if you want to donate, because we are a nonprofit, we're a 501c3, so you can do that also on the same website, InnocentLivesFoundation.org. So go check us out there. Last but not least, if you're loving the music at the intro and outro of this podcast, if you're listening to it on iTunes or Spotify or one of the audio versions, then you are loving the sounds of the best rock and roll band on earth, Clutch. We love them. Brian and I have been huge fans for almost more than half of our lives. They've been in the biz for 31 years. More than half of our lives. I'm not 61. So neither is Ryan. So that's pretty terrible. For a long time. Okay. We've been fans since they were around. So how about that? And they have graciously allowed us to use their music at the intro and outro music for this podcast. So we're super happy, and they're huge supporters of ILF. Their Spotify donate button goes right to ILF, so we're very happy to have their support. So go give them some love. Check them out at pro-rock.com. And the best way to ingest Clutch, go see them live. It's just awesome. Awesome live. So go do that. They have a tour all over the place. No matter where you are on earth, you can see them. Okay, let's get to our guest. I'm super excited about this guest today because there's a lot in common, and we're going to learn. So like many security experts, John Young started out on the wrong side of the law. Yep. He manipulating AT&T's phone system. As a teenage boy, he was a phone phreaker. If you're not sure what that is, we'll get into what that is. In New York City, before the FBI scared him straight. Happily, not with an arrest, not dragging him out of the house and putting him in cuffs, but he got scared straight, and then he went into InfoSec. So what happened? 1982 and 1987, he started his 4-decade career. It was in 1982. In 1987, he became the network director for McDonnell Douglas $41.8 billion C-17 program. That's ridiculous. Okay, let's jump forward now. 30 years, he retires from IBM, and he starts his own company called CyberDef. He's regarded as America's top cybersecurity experts and thought leaders. He's published dozens of articles, appeared on countless podcasts, and is designing a video course for people based on his book so they can thrive in cybersecurity, which is something we desperately need in this industry right now. So, John, thank you for coming on the show and being a guest here.
My pleasure, Chris. Thanks for the invite. Thanks, Ryan, also. And appreciate the amazing intro. I really want to get into it because I think I've been on a lot of podcasts, but this is the one where we can go to the bare metal and talk about technical stuff and really get into it with you guys who have been in the field for so long. We can trade some war stories and talk about being in the trenches. And I'm sure people will get a lot of enjoyment out of hearing these stories.
So let's talk about your intro into it. So AT&T's phone system, can you talk a little bit about what you did there and what kind of desire that built in you and how you got scared straight? So you wanted to do this for the good side, not the bad?
Absolutely. Now, if we go into just the terms of social engineering, that actually goes all the way back to 1894. And it was used by companies to basically find out about the culture of their company and be able to get better efficiency and productivity. Now the term social engineering is morphed into being able to manipulate people to do what you want. So basically you're a con artist. From an older guy in my neighborhood, how to be what you said was a phone phreak in 1974, 75. And what we would do is we would get on with an operator, which people don't even know what that is these days, a phone operator. Everyone's got a phone plan, so you don't care about calling from one area code or state to state. For instance, if you call to another state, the call could be $100 for a half an hour call. And in 1974 dollars, that's the equivalent of $400 or $500. So it was a big deal.
I remember those days.
We would manipulate the people by charging it to a business that was closed, and we'd go through all these little tricks and get them to do it. And basically, one day after 3 years, 2 FBI agents showed up at my 4'11" Irish grandmother's house, wondering who made these thousands of dollars of unbillable calls to her house in New York, California.
Oh my!
Now, my grandmother was my favorite person in the world. She was my number one. And when I left when I was 18 from New York to go to California, I broke our cardinal golden rule of never calling directly to a home. We would always do payphone to payphone. We'd say, okay, I'll meet you 8 o'clock. You'll be at that payphone in New York, 5 o'clock California time. I'll call, you pick up. We did it hundreds of times. When I do it with my grandmother, I would talk to her for a long time. And she had no idea what was going on. But what happened was at the time they were calling on her in New York, the FBI had a team of agents knocking on doors in Laguna Niguel, California, asking who is calling New York and making thousands of dollars of unbillable calls from the community pool. So at that time, my New York accent was so thick, you could cut it with a knife. It was like Robert De Niro thick. And if you heard my brother right now leave a message on the answering machine, he's still there. You would understand what I'm talking about. So what happened was I was sweating bullets because in New York, it was like a petty fraud if you call in the state. But once you go out of state, it becomes interstate theft of services. That's why the FBI was involved. And interstate theft of services can carry up to a 10-year prison sentence for each charge.
Wow.
And they had said I had called over 50 times. And they had no idea it had been a lot more than that. I just did an interview with the man who had taught me how to be a social engineer. And he estimates he'd done 600, 700, 800 calls like that because his girlfriend was still in New York and he was calling her multiple times a day. So in my interview with him, it came across that I took the straight and narrow path because I had said, I never want to be in this kind of situation again. And I just got into the computer security field eventually in a few years because there were no computers then. When I was 18, it was 1977. So there was no PCs, there was no internet, there was an ARPANET, COBOL, Fortran, BASIC, and Assembler were the only programs that were basically around. There was no Java, there was no HTML. So I went on the straight and narrow trail. He had the FBI drag out his partner a couple of years later while he had the equivalent, my associate had the equivalent of $270,000 in today's money in cash in his closet that the FBI never even looked for because they got the guy they wanted. So he split and went to Europe for 6 months and still kept doing like scams. But eventually he became the unwitting scam and the largest fraud in American history up to that time. It was a fraud that certifying new oil as old oil. And basically it was a $800 million fraud.
Wow.
The head of it went down hard. He had owned an island in the Caribbean. He owned the Xanadu Hotel. But meanwhile, my buddy didn't know what he was doing. He thought the oil was real. He's like, where is all this oil? We have 50,000 barrels of oil coming through here in a day. And he said that they would get a wire for $500,000 in a day. They'd wire out 400,000. So they'd be making $100,000 a day to do what they were doing. So his Confederate actually went to prison for a year also, but he gave evidence and that was a real mess. I actually had read about this certification of the oil thing, and I said, sounds like a scam because there's no chemical difference for it. And the guy that actually wound up doing it told me I was crazy, that it was a stupid idea. And he wound up going to jail for it later and making a bunch of money. But at that time, I didn't care about any of that. I just wanted to be John Q. Citizen and live a real life because I was always worried that the FBI was going to drag me out of my house. And this went on for years because I actually, as you said, became, network director at McDonnell Douglas. But that's not how my career started. I started as a guy that put the printer, paper, and toner in the printers and did the backups a few years earlier. And the lady that hired me basically pulled me from obscurity. I was working in a 100-degree laundry room of a hotel while I was going to school. And she basically brought me into a 10-person company. She went to McDonnell Douglas, a 250,000-person company who landed a $41.8 billion contract for the C-17 program. If you look at $41.8 billion now, it'd be probably $200 billion or something like that. But within a few years, I had 2 FBI investigations on me. The first was when she hired me. It was a small government cartography contractor who did maps from like satellites. So they did a low-level investigation of me. I was like, what's going on here? I had the FBI investigate me before. Is this sword still hanging over my head? Yes, it was. But it was okay because they didn't do too much. Then when I became the network director, suddenly my clearance had to go way higher because this is a major, major program. Mm-hmm. I think I had top secret or something like that. It was so long ago. I don't even remember. That's over 35 years ago. But basically, this time they went to my neighbors in New York and were knocking on doors and making phone calls asking about me. And no one really, it was 10 plus years, really thought too much about me. And, I was a good kid. The stuff we were doing was pranks. Like you said, we didn't really think it was such a big deal. It was actually real crimes, going on at that time, violent crimes. And New York at that time, I think, had one of the highest murder rates ever. But that brought me into social engineering. And I think that gave me a real advantage to knowing the criminal mindset, because the bottom line is this: you want to get something for nothing. And that's what every hacker has as their mentality. They want to get something for nothing. They may put out a little effort. They may build a website. They may try to trap you, but it's minuscule compared to what they think they're going to get the payoff.
So we obviously don't want to encourage people to take that path to get into cybersecurity, right?
No.
Because granted, I nothing as serious as you, but people know my story too, and writing a war dialer and yada yada. And nowadays, you do these things and you end up in prison as like a domestic terrorist. So, but being in this industry is something that we see a lot of people wanting to do. Like, people seem to be dumping careers that they've had for maybe decades, just exiting them just to get into InfoSec. What advice do you have for people who are trying to seek that out or trying to get into this industry?
Okay, addressing the first thing, don't do it. Don't get into cybersecurity the wrong way.
Yeah. There's
no reason for it. I did it kind of accidentally. And if I knew what I was doing, I never would have done it, because it gave me imposter syndrome for many years, where I was worried that people were going to find out that I was really not the person that they thought should be in charge of all of this stuff. If they only knew, they would take away my career. So don't do it, because it'll give you a totally bad feeling. The second question, what should people do about dumping their careers? I'm actually designing a course on how to transition into cybersecurity without leaving your career skills behind, because there's a desperate need for people who are hybrid employees, I call them. You've heard of hybrid environments, hybrid workers who work from home and then they work from the office. Well, a hybrid worker, you can sort of consider them as a bilingual person, or a person that can speak multiple languages. I'll give you a great example. Say you have someone in HR who has to hire cybersecurity consultants. Now, I spoke at USC a couple months ago to their master's degree program for HR executives about what are the characteristics to look for in a cybersecurity employee as opposed to a cybersecurity consultant. So for them, that was a real insight, because they don't think that way. They don't really understand, because they don't have that technical training. They're focused on company policies for every other department, and cybersecurity is just one other department to them. But each HR department is going to need at least one cybersecurity person to do that, to help with the hiring, because a cybersecurity consultant can make $200 to $800 per hour. And if a company sinks the money into a consultant on a project and they can't deliver, that's a huge loss, because now the people at work there, this happened to me many times in my teams, we'd have people come in as consultants and we'd have to train them on what to do. And we'd know they'd be making 4 or 5 times more than we were, yet we were teaching them what to do. And then they'd go on somewhere else and then brag about how they helped make this project a reality at our company. So that creates a lot of dissension in companies, and I've seen people leave just off of that. But secondly, here's a great example of sensitive information. The National Guardsman, Jack Teixeira, who was 21 years old and an IT professional, had access to top secret documents that he should never had access to. It should have been someone in that community who was a hybrid employee, who actually had the cybersecurity skills to patch the server, help with that. They may not be able to do all the things, but they could work with IT and limit the IT privileges, access, rights, whatever it is that it requires. Now, patching will require expertise that maybe would be a little above their level for applications and middleware. That's not something you do on a whim. Like, we'd have 3,000 programmers at IBM. on one machine that are racing to a deadline. And if you kill the productivity by bringing down a machine, that's the same as a hacker getting in there and taking, millions of dollars of productivity away.
Yeah.
So with this kind of situation, my team, we had access to the HR server for 9 years. Of course, this was 20 years ago, but HR just let our team handle everything. So my experiences, I've gone to seminars and actually talked to people in these different fields who are desperate to have organically created people that not only know HR, not only know insurance, but they also have the skills in cybersecurity. Just look at healthcare. The HIPAA laws that healthcare people have to respond to are way more extreme than people even know because of patient confidentiality. So if they're giving IT all of this information and a problem happens with IT, it doesn't matter. The penalties can go up to $1.5 million for a healthcare organization. And if they have, say, like one company had 10 hospitals, suddenly you're talking about way over 10 million, and no organization is going to be able to absorb loss of over $10 million without laying people off, because that's the bottom line. It always affects the workers. We're only headcount. And so that's what I'm really doing, is telling people, like an electrician. Someone has 15 years as an electrician. Why give them up to work at the SOC junior analyst level, making $20 an hour to get the experience? You've gotten your certificates. You can use your electrical experience. You can be wiring up data centers. You could be wiring up labs. You can be doing the security updates that the regular electrician comes in and he's like, yeah, I wire it up. I know what to do. But these updates are coming fast and furious. They're going to want someone to come in there that knows, okay, this biometric reader needs to be upgraded by someone who actually knows what they're doing. So that's what I see in the future, because everything is tied in. And in the IT information technology world, I will consider myself an integrator. The same thing I see with OT, operational technology. It's all becoming integrated. Manufacturing, smart buildings. Everyone that has a job there, why dump your career skills that you spent all these years and education on just to get in at the entry level to be in cybersecurity without really knowing what cybersecurity is about, and without understanding that you can do it in your own field and be a superstar rather than be bottom of the totem pole.
So you're saying basically to go out and learn the cybersecurity side of it, but then go back to where you originally started from and just introduce those new techniques into like whatever department you were in before, whether it's HR or even other industries of electrical. So you're leaving it for a moment to learn the cybersecurity stuff and then coming back and utilizing that previous experience. Am I hearing that part right?
Yes. And the companies are desperate for it. Some aren't even realizing it. I think I'm more sort of on the cutting edge of this. I always try to be a visionary and be a little ahead, because I spend all my time thinking about this stuff. AI, what jobs are going to be eliminated, how people can integrate their skills into cybersecurity, what to look for, and like I say, cybersecurity consultants, how to thrive in cybersecurity, not just get in there, because people don't realize, okay, now I'm in. What happens now? Do I do expense reports? Do I do service level agreements? Am I traveling the world? Like I traveled the world setting up networks and offices, and I lived a really good life all on the company dime because of the fact that I had that skill set. So there's a great upside to this. And if you're in HR, okay, and you have cybersecurity skills, you're not doing what I was doing, working around the clock at times. You're in HR. You have an HR schedule. You're there from 9 to 5 to 6. It's a very, very clean lifestyle as opposed to someone who's in pure cybersecurity where, you're under tremendous amounts of pressure and total deadlines, at least at the corporate level. It's different all the way around. Cybersecurity is a field that's so gigantic, no one can be a true expert in everything. But I'm the guy that had experience in every type of IT job. And I was a manager too. I had 40 offices that I managed around the world with the mail servers and the servers and labs and data center and 30 plus direct reports that were all technical people, network team, the help desk team. So I developed a vision of seeing how they all fit together, not just, okay, I'm working the help desk. Here's how it works. I'm working the server labs with the Unix team and the Windows team. No, I was able to see how it is. And that's how I kind of see the future with smart buildings. Like I had mentioned before, there's conferences that last 2-3 days just on smart buildings. How are they going to affect people in the future? Because say a hacker gets into a smart building, they could shut down and lock down whole floors. They can turn off, lights. They can change the temperature. They can allow access to different labs. So they can turn cameras off. You've seen it in the movies, right? Like Ocean's 11. Well, that's not far from reality, really. If they can actually break in and do stuff like that, then the need for people that are hybrids is just off the charts. And it's just going to keep going higher and higher. And that's why I say, why start low when you could start high and be a superstar? And they really don't even have to leave, Ryan, and go and get these certificates and come back. Okay. They could do it while they're in their job. I think it's actually beneficial to be at a company, become the go-to person that, okay, John knows how to take care of this. John knows how to talk to the IT people. And eventually they'll be, okay, you take care of this and you take care of that. And then you'd get a title maybe, or if you don't get the title, you could look for another job and another company is going to want you. Because sometimes I've found that companies will take people for granted that have been there for a long time. They'll just be accepted. But when they go to another place, they'll be like, wow, I can't believe you can do all of this stuff. So even consulting too. Someone could be an HR consultant and just do what I just said over and over and over again. Go into companies and help them hire cybersecurity consultants. Recruiter. Wouldn't a recruiter be awesome? Rather than just put stuff up on a board, wouldn't they be fantastic if they could break down someone's skills and say why this person is the right person for this project rather than some automated AI going through your resume and eliminating possibly many good candidates? Because I just found out a few weeks ago that the automated systems, if they hit a box or a line, they stop and they go down. They can't go straight across. So I was like, wow, I see a lot of people with pictures and these different text boxes in there. It never even gets across because it's trained to only stop and go that far, at least at this point. So a human being right now who has those skills is going to be at a premium.
Well, what do you think is going to happen in the near future with all this talk about AI? Like, how is AI coming into the picture going to affect some of these things you just said and the importance of the human in the company, in your opinion?
It's going to have a big effect. A lot of what I'm reading right now is management is talking about AI with such excitement, then they're going to be putting a lot of resources in it. And people don't realize they use AI every single day. There's so many different things that they're using AI for that they don't even know. GPS, right? That's tracking where you're going, and it's there's some AI behind that. If you use a VRU system for the voice recognition, eventually that's it. AI. You go on Amazon and you buy stuff. There's AI that monitors your spending patterns. So it's learning what you're doing. I'll get in my car right now and it'll learn that, okay, I went to this place 3 Thursdays in a row. I'll turn on my car and the GPS map will pop up asking if I wanted to go to that location. So that's a machine learned AI type of situation that people don't even recognize. I'll give you a good example. When I was growing up as a kid, there was a guy that used to push a cart that sharpened knives for 30 plus years. Okay. No one had a knife sharpener. So people would go running out. He'd ring a bell. Then the manufacturers of the electric can openers start putting the knife sharpeners on the back. Suddenly and he wanted an electric can opener, didn't need his skills. So it was really sad. He'd walk around ringing the bell. No one was running out anymore. So what people have to do now is get ahead of the curve and see if their skill set is one of those that's prone to being taken over by AI. I know a lot of people love pen testing and they want to be in pen testing, and I think it's great. I've hired lots of pen testers who are really good, but just look at it, okay? Vulnerability testing and pen testing are two different things. Vulnerability will find your vulnerabilities. Pen testing will actually go in and do exploits with the company's permission. So vulnerability testing is already super automated. I did hundreds of scans, thousands. I think I did thousands of automated scans, and then I just look at the results later and see which ones were really critical and important. But with pen testing, it's a little more that they go in, they find the exposures, and they go and exploit it. Now, you have one pen tester, he'll go in and he'll be able to work on, okay, this is an exposure, I'll work on that. Here's an exposure with the mail system, I'll work on that. Here's an exposure at this endpoint, I'll work on that. Meanwhile, the AI could find them and it can work on all of them simultaneously and bring them back, because that's just what they do. That's what computers do. That's what AI does. It does the simple things, but it does them a million times faster than we do. So that's why I say pen testing, I think, is very vulnerable in the future, because a pen tester can get in and exploit something, but AI will go in and exploit everything at once that it finds. Of course, you're going to have to put limitations on it. Otherwise, it may bring your whole enterprise crashing down. So that could be a real problem. And, I just think I saw the evolution of the help desk, where it used to be a white glove thing. People would call the help desk, and the help desk would call land support, and land support would go down to your desk and, this and that. They'd call it the hurt desk in those days. Now you call, it's outsourced to some country that's, 2,000-3,000 miles away. A lot of these tickets are closed through attrition, where people just give up, they just don't even call anymore. So yeah, the help desk could have a 99.9 success rate, but is it really that kind of success rate? So next is AI, because we already have the chatbots. That's also AI, right?
Yeah.
So people are using chatbots, using AI, and that's, you can't get away from it. It's just going to increase in the future.
So what would you say to companies or to people listening, based on the few topics we talked about today? We like in this edition of the podcast, we like to give some tips and tricks. Like what can they do? Usually we focus, let's say, on companies. What can companies start doing today based on your experience and your knowledge to get ahead of that curve you spoke about?
Companies can do is this: they can stop looking at cybersecurity as overhead. There's still a lot of dinosaur type executives who are only focused on sales, revenue, marketing, because that's the benchmark and the metric by which everything is measured. But one data breach can catastrophically destroy the revenue for a year, can bring down the stock price. Yeah. So what they need to do is put more into things like you guys do, training with your training academy, awareness, because the bottom line is this: if you look at almost every single exploit, I'm going to say almost every exploit, but I think if you look at every big exploit, it started out with one social engineering access point. That's how you got in the first place. If you're a social engineer, you're going to look for that little crack. I've caught people dumpster diving. I've caught people piggybacking, tailgating, being let in. They'll come in with a pizza box, and people, meanwhile, they can throw a whole bunch of laptops in and be gone. And of course, wearing masks, that makes it even harder. With COVID, people would be walking around nearly empty offices, and they could grab whatever they want. So I think there's a lot that companies need to do on training. Like IBM is a gold standard in my mind, because IBM had the IT people doing what they were doing. Then they had me and my team watching IT doing what they were doing. Then they had a division separate of people that were watching what I was doing while I was monitoring IT doing what they're doing. So you have three levels right there. And the level of professionalism, training, the money that's spent, my X division, the cloud division at IBM, I think they did 17 billion in revenue, just one division in 1 year. And one of the last years I was there, they topped $100 billion in revenue, not million, 100 billion. That's 100 billion is 1,000 times 100 million. So you could see how important cybersecurity becomes. If they put 100 million into cybersecurity, that's just a drop in the bucket. And I can guarantee you that they monitor things like that, and all the big corporations do. That's why it's very rare that you find a super big corporation getting really, really hacked in a way that is crushing. And if you do find it out, it's because they have exposures in policies, processes, and procedures somewhere. Like Equifax, the chairman of Equifax went to Congress and he blamed it all on one guy who didn't do the patching right for Apache struts, right? And I got to say, okay, that's another weakness there. We could talk about, if you had time, we could definitely talk about it, but open source. Anything that's open source, I've done so many open source things. I've done thousands of scans, like I said, and almost every time the vulnerability was some kind of open source. If you look at Apache, not to pick on them, but they're a foundation of volunteers who have day jobs. Mm-hmm. So if they have like the log4j problem come out, they've got to like hope people are going to come in and be able to work on that. In the meantime, it's causing all chaos around the world, and people like us are working around the clock trying to solve these problems. But if the companies would actually put more money into it, it would help also protect people at the bottom end. With the Equifax breach, that was 146 million customer records got stolen. To put that in perspective, there's only 115 million full-time employees in the United States. So they had the records basically of anyone who worked in the United States and people who had retired and part-timers. And that's the social security number of everyone in Equifax's records, because that's the holy grail. If you can get the social security number, you can build an identity. You don't really need anything else. You can find everything else out. You can get everything else out that you need to do that. I was one of the people that was breached, so it doesn't matter if I'm a cybersecurity expert. I have 3 credit monitoring services right now to make sure that someone in Alabama isn't buying a boat or buying a house. And I don't want to pick on Alabama either, but it seems like there's some, I just saw a wave of things happening in certain areas that I'm wondering, is it that there's organized rings of people down there that are doing this, or how are they pulling this off in certain areas? But if companies put more money into training, awareness, and into, the equipment's so good now too, the appliances, then it would help a lot.
So that's a couple good tips. I appreciate that. That really helps us kind of point people in the right direction. You said you're coming out with a course. Where will people be able to find information about that course if they're interested in taking it? And when will it be out also?
Well, it's going to be on Cyber Job Central.
Okay.
And they're launching next month. And it's going to be from my book. I wrote a book. It's my cybersecurity book. Took me like 8,000 hours. It was 800 pages.
And what's the name of the book? Hold it up again so we can get the title, and we'll put that in the show notes.
This is me as the anti-hacker. My parrot right here. She's upstairs. I just gave her a shower. But it's called Don't Hack, How to Kick Hackers to the Curb. And basically it covers everything from cybersecurity of data centers to cybersecurity of license agreements, because just look at this. If a company doesn't maintain their license agreements, then they aren't able to patch, right? If they're not able to patch, then suddenly they have a vulnerability because they didn't have the license agreements kept into place. It's these little details, change management and change control. Change management refers to what we're talking about with social engineering, of changing the culture of what people are doing. And change control is monitoring the assets like the network. You've got to have every change monitored. We used to call it a MAC, move, add, or change, where anything like the phones, the computers, any changes you made or anywhere you moved them had to be approved by a manager. And IBM's great about this too. I mean, you've got to go through these approval levels. There's a chain of evidence that, you could find out forensically everything. And that's where a lot of smaller companies aren't really making it coming up. They need to come up to speed on that, is to apply some standards and to really follow them. Because there's a lot of people in IT, they call them IT cowboys, and that think they know a shorter way to do things, a faster way to do things, a more efficient way to do things. And they may cut through company policy. And what they do is they create a exposure, or they actually shoot themselves in the foot. And those policies and processes and procedures are in there for a reason, because someone else shot themselves in the foot earlier, and they learned from that. So they built on that. Like the IBM thing I was telling you about, that we had to follow policies, was over 900 pages at that time, covered every device, every operating system, every application, every middleware, anything you could possibly imagine was covered. And it's probably like 1,500 pages now. And you didn't have to memorize it, but you had to know, which section, like, was it Ubuntu Linux? Was it Red Hat Linux? Was it Windows Server? Going all the way back. So big companies, they have it down. Smaller companies need to use bigger companies as a model. One of the articles I wrote was an A to Z game plan for companies. And a lot of the tips that I have in there are free for what they could do to save themselves money. Because a lot of these things don't even cost a penny. They could throw as much hardware as they want, but a lot of it is just following, simple little guidelines, and it'll make all the difference in the world. So they could find that article. I can send you the link. I have, like I said, tons of articles, and I can send you a link to some I think would really be helpful to businesses, how to stay in the game and not get blown away while not blowing the budget. Because that's really important. The budget is. I remember my team spent 2 weeks designing a network, because we had moved from one facility to another based on the CIO's like dream network, and he'd give me all of these ideas and this and that. We spent 2 weeks designing it. I brought in. He flips through all the way to the end, because I printed it out for him. Looks at the bottom line cost. Said, "John, what are you trying to get me fired? I asked for the Cadillac model, not the Ferrari model." Because we had redundancy built in and failovers and all this stuff you really need. So that's what I think the future is a lot needs to be with failovers. Like I said, redundancy of networks. In the old days, they wouldn't put the money in it. Like, why? Now, if you a big company, if they go down for an hour, that's $1 million, $2 million, $3 million loss of productivity.
Well, John, and thank you for the tips. And in closing, I want to say, I'm going to put if you're okay, I'm going to put your LinkedIn profile in the show notes so people know where they can connect with you and follow. That would be good.
Sure, absolutely.
And if you send me some of those articles, send them our way. We can put them in the show notes also, so people can find them easily. And be able to reference those, because we know our listeners they love to read. We'll make sure a link to your book is in there, and then those articles can be really helpful as good tips and tricks for people who want to either get in the industry or enhance their security posture in the industry.
Yes. Well, everybody knows on LinkedIn you can find 100 people that talk about how to get into cybersecurity. It's a fantastic field. You can see an arc of growth that's never going to go down now. Now that the criminal element is involved, it's only going to get more and more important. My point is, getting in is one thing, but thriving in it is another. So that's what I write about in my newsletters and some of my articles that get published in other places, is how do you thrive in cybersecurity? So I try to open people's eyes to not only how great it is, but the different jobs that are available and how they can progress and have a really fulfilling career. Because there was a lot of pressure. Don't get me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
There can be like millions of dollars worth of pressure. And if you're the kind of person that feels it, like I felt like I was a type A plus personality, not type A. I was type A plus when it came to that. I learned to meditate after I retired. Unfortunately, I didn't learn before that. But I'd say for anyone that's interested, if they want to connect with me, sure, they'll be able to get tons of information, and it won't be generic. It'll be pretty specific stuff on what they can do. And companies too. If you're a small business owner and you have 10 people in there, hackers are going to go after you because it's almost like jewelry. It's a smash and grab operation for a small jewelry store as opposed to a months long operation to rob the crown jewels, right? Both of them are happening all the time. And a majority of them, these smash and grabs where they're in and out, and people will put their cell phone number as their wireless password at offices. And I've been there where they've done that, so there's all kinds of problems that can occur there. But I'm happy to help anybody. I spent so many years building this knowledge. Can't even imagine what people are going to see with the combination of quantum computing and AI. See, that's what I'm looking at, is when you combine quantum computing with AI, where not just an on-off bit where they can be in both states at the same time. And AI is now running at such a huge, fast speed. So that's where I see things going. And, thanks for having me. It was really a pleasure to talk to you guys. I think I talked more than you talked, obviously, but it was good just sort of reaching out to your audience and letting them know what the future is going to be like, what the past was like, what the present's like, but even more important, what their future can be like.
So thanks for coming on the show, John, and sharing all that with us. And thank you all for being with us this month and listening. Next month, we're going to be joined by Jason Rebholz from Corvus Insurance. So another great conversation. See what we can learn from him about how we could stay secure in the security awareness episode. So until next month, stay safe. See you.